Hello, Tankers and Gamers. It's Momentary Genius here, back with a review of a tank that, as you may have noticed in my title, this is not a medium tank, but it is in fact a main battle tank. The reason I titled this video the way I did was because the Challenger 2, in summation, the best way to play it is as a medium tank because it has no armor on its side or rear, and its front plate is pretty weak. Just to show you here, the most armor you get is at right there at the front of the turret. Then on the sides of the turret, again, this is a hull down champion from a distance, like you would play a good portion of mediums, especially at the beginning of a game. So 420 at the front, that's part of the Trupham armor, which, again, is pretty much at the front of the turret and somewhat on its side. The front portion of the hull on the top does get some armor. You get a little bit here on the front plate, but once you start lowering the numbers, you see that reality-wise, you want to play this thing hull down, and from a distance, I say at the beginning of the match, because I have this fully upgraded, and with hull traverse, this tank can move forwards and backwards. This has a great reverse speed for the NMBT. In all honesty, and I've had to constantly catch myself of, trying to turn the tank around to move, to get out of position when I'm taking fire. And it's like, no, don't do that, because you have no hull armor on the sides and in the rear, but also it backs up so fast, like 60 plus kph possibly, if you have a long story, but it's really fast. I mean, that's also the problem, is if you're not hull down and from a distance, your silver preferred firing gun at 730 penetration, yeah, you're gonna be wanting to use silver for this one. You're not gonna be in the winning position here, because any tank will outcircle you, and getting you from the side and the rear, you're done. You're a big tank. And that's why I recommend for any new players playing this as a medium. And once you get to the halfway point of the match and you're winning, start moving. You can relocate very easily. And be ready to move once you realize your position's been given up and you're taking hits from the side or the rear. Because very quickly you can go from being a hull down champion and being the best Ridgeline queen there is to being a Swiss cheese on treads. So, and now with that, I will take you over to some gameplay, where I will discuss more my opinion on really the whole grind to the Challenger 2 and more of my opinions on this. And here we are for the first match on the Siegfried line. Now, this isn't a spectacular match for me. I survived to the end, we win, but I do technically fulfill the requirements of getting hull down in this match, as you will see in a bit. But to really point out here that you really have to be hull down and your turret has to be facing the enemy, because almost at any other angle, your hull and your turret can be overmatched. And that is a bit of a problem. Here you're seeing I have the gas boost on, um, but nowadays I run with actually the extinguishers. The only thing I have the extinguisher on right now, just because of how often I got set fire. Ammo racking is a bit of an issue with this tank, as is with all British tanks. But yeah, this is a tank where module damage is a little more prevalent. So again, you definitely want to keep your distance. Um, and it to go to the grind up to this tank, it was miserable for me as an average player. Um, I'm up to tier 9 in the Conqueror in World War II, and that was surprisingly more enjoyable, even with the Churchill tanks, which are slow but well armored and great guns. And that's still like the main theme with these British tanks is you want to keep that gun firing. And this has a really good gun, well accurate, like I said, highest penetration at 730 alpha with silver. You will want to be spending some silver, preferably silver, not gold, with this tank. But as you can see, I've gone from that first crater, and why I'm out in the open on Siegfried Line, a map that shouldn't be in Era 3. I don't really remember why I was doing this. Still early days from this clip with the Challenger 2, but using some of these anti-tank setup to my advantage. But back to the grind. You start off with British medium tanks that, again, when you're used to either being slow and well armored or being well armored but slower and harder hitting, like with the T44A and M48s and stuff like that, having basically only good DPM can throw you off. And that's what those British mediums had. Along when they first came out was a veteran nerf that really screwed me over, but hey. And again, being dependent on hull down, because all those tanks lack hull armor. And you get used to that. You adapt to that, especially when you get to the Centurion 5-1. And then you start getting into that groove. You start figuring out how to move as a medium, how to attack, how to support. And then you get thrusted into the Conqueror in Era 2. Suddenly, you're a slow tank with a slightly slower firing gun, but still a good gun. And you're big. You're tall, you're fat, you're slow, and you have to deal with ATGMs. It's at this point where I kind of wish they had separated the tank line into mediums and heavies, which probably wouldn't have consisted of a lot of tanks, but just really long XP grinds. But it's so jarring to get used to fighting in a medium tank and getting good at that to suddenly be handicapped by being large and slow. But of course, if you want to also play any of the British light tanks, you have to go through this line. The only way to unlock any of the light tanks really is to go through the entire MBT line, which is annoying. So now you find yourself going up against tanks that like half of them are faster than you. Almost all of them can pen you, and a decent chunk of them can fire missiles that can one-shot you. So you adjust to that, and then you get into like the chieftains, which you start feeling small improvements with each new tank. The problem is they're all slow, they're all big. You really don't want to get into brawls. You can adapt. You can. I assume this because I've seen the marks of excellence on some of these tanks. Not so much the Conqueror. And it was very annoying and very insufferable. Like, So there are those who feel like, oh, this is a balanced tank because they got really good guns, but they're slower and they have weaker armor. Well, some of us are like, these tanks are not capable and competent against the other tanks in these areas. And that honestly feels kind of like how the Challenger 2 is done. Like, there's no side chop of armor like there's on the turret, on the hull. So almost at any angle, other than head on and at a distance, you're gonna get penned. And yet, you're technically in one of the greatest tanks ever built. So psychologically, you're like, wait, what is this? It almost feels like Wargaming deliberately handicapped this tank to keep it quote unquote balanced. Meanwhile, especially now with the new Merkava tanks, all the other MBT tanks, if you look at them, they've got some serious hull and turret armor in the front and on the sides, especially in the front. Meanwhile, the Challenger 2 just has a few decent slabs of turret armor. And in any position other than on a hill or a ridgeline, you will find yourself outmaneuvered and out of your comfort zone. This tank is dependent on its comfort zone, and that's why I don't recommend this for new players. This whole tank line is not. It's more for either World War II nostalgia fools, sorry, or people with legitimate tanking skills and have experience with this. And that's kind of like why I persevered. I pushed through. I used XP boosters. I used free XP. And I eventually got the challenge 2 and I was like, the only other Era 3 I have prior to this was the T-70BU. And it's night and day. The T-70BU can move. It can take a hit. It can brawl. It can snipe. It can shoot ATGMs. And so I go in the challenge 2, which is like, I am a really good support tank. Please don't get into an up-face conflict with me. Like, even the 182 Abrams, yeah, it's got that weak front plate, or upper plate, I should say. But it can move and it can hit hard, and has side armor, so you can do a little bit of side scraping with that tank. Challenger 2, stick to the ridge lines, especially at the beginning of the match, soften up enemies, and then you can start maneuvering in and out to finish them off. I guess I'll learn to love this thing someday, but for the most part, it's great when I can hit the enemy. It sucks when the enemy hits me. So I'll leave it there. New players, average players, don't rush into the British tanks at first. I still say go with the Russians, although the Israeli tanks, those are pretty good. We can't wait to get the Merkava, but yeah. Anyone saying the British tanks in Cold War are awesome, you've got the skills and you've got the predisposed biases, but for me and my experience, way too much work for what are supposed to be awesome tanks. Maybe that's just a game. Real world is always different. So that said, I hope the RNG is in your favor and keep your treads on the ground. And I will catch you in the next one. Momentary Genius out.